Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and the co-host of the podcast Fear and Greed Business News. And as always, I'm joined in the studio by Canna Campbell, financial planner and founder of Sugar Mama TV. We're lucky to get some of your time in here because you are very busy. You're kind of on kind of YouTube, and you're doing books and Instagram and Threads and TikTok and all of these.
I'll always make time for you, it's okay. Because I know how much you need my help.
I certainly do. As we learn every week I think it surprises you just how big the gaps are in my knowledge.
Yes, 100%. I'm not going to lie.
Wow, this is savage.
Just when I think, oh, wow, he could actually run this podcast himself. Then I go, there's another hole.
There's another hole.
Big black hole.
Of knowledge. Yeah, there are some topics where I feel like I could do it on my own because I've listened to you so closely, and particularly when we get to like superannuation and things, your enthusiasm for those topics has really kind of rubbed off. Then we get to other ones where I'm like, yeah, I have no idea.
What I think is funniest for me is when you think you know something and you just go like a bull at a gate thinking you've got this answer sorted and I'm like, no. Oh, that's not the answer, Michael.
Which typically happens most weeks, doesn't it? It's a bad habit I have of making assumptions and then just watching you shoot them down. Today's episode it's quite a serious one, and it's a topic that really does affect a lot of people, because you ask any kind of working parent with kind of young kids and they will tell you just how expensive childcare is. It is so dear, and it can lead to some pretty challenging conversations. And this is why I say it's quite a serious topic, because it does lead to some bigger kind of issues and questions about kind of returning to work, about how you balance the family budget, kind of, and really that really kind of basic element of how do you actually make ends meet when you have kind of young kids and you've got one parent or two parents trying to work at the same time, and then you have this enormous expense of childcare. And so this is a topic that we've kind of mentioned in passing a few times now, and we've had listeners writing into us about it, wanting to kind of know what's the approach, how does it all work, and kind of how do you actually balance it. So we're going to get into it today. So let's start with the very basics then, Canna. How much can childcare actually cost? Because some of the figures are eye-watering.
So there's no straight answer.
Okay.
But on average, according to Kids Club Childcare, it's around about $167 per day per child. So it obviously is going to fluctuate depending on where you're based, the age of your child, how many days, and obviously the actual facility that you've chosen.
And you say that is per child. There can sometimes be a discount, can't there, if there's 2 kids or 3 kids or...
Yes, the discount, the more children you have there, obviously discounts start to kick in, but they're not actually that big and they don't really help that much.
Okay. And so in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference, kind of combining everyone into one big fake family and kind of pushing it. I'm enrolling 14 kids today and they're all mine and they're all about the same age. It's not going to make a huge amount of difference.
No.
Now, the rebate system, this can get a little bit complicated, can't it? Because it is set up to essentially offset a lot of the cost or some of the cost of childcare. Can you take us through how it works?
So it's a subsidy and it's paid to the childcare provider, so the centre, and it is calculated based on your income, the age of the child, the type of childcare, and the hours that you work. In fact, most people's subsidies actually kicked in during Frugal February.
Oh, really? And so, what kind of percentage are we talking about here? It can be quite high.
It really does range.
Yeah. Okay, so it can be from somewhere kind of like 50% up to like 85% or something, can't it?
Yeah, so it's subject. That's why they need to know your income, your situation, whether you're a single parent or not, how many days your child is in the facilities, and of course, the age. So I have 2 children that just started this year in daycare, and one gets a bigger subsidy than the other.
Okay.
Simply because of age.
All right. And how is that then calculated? Is that done through the ATO? Is it or through Centrelink?
So you do it through the actual childcare centre.
All right.
Well, that's how we did it. They said, look, give us your details. This is the form you need to fill out and we'll take care of everything for you. Okay. And it was all lodged because they actually get paid the subsidy.
Okay. All right. So it just essentially then reduces the amount that you have to pay then out of pocket.
Exactly.
All right. And now the other thing about childcare is that there's not a huge amount of flexibility in there, is it? Like, you are kind of almost locked in for those particular days. Even if your child is sick, you're still paying for those days when they are not at daycare.
Correct. It is expensive if they're sick, or, and you've got a couple of kids that are sick, because that means obviously you can't take them in, and obviously they're contagious. Sometimes, like head lice, as an example. I remember getting a phone call to pick my son up because he had head lice. That you've paid for that day, you don't get it back. But some childcare centres, though, when it comes to public holidays, don't charge you.
Okay.
That's why you've got to do your research as well.
Okay. All right. I think that's probably a good kind of overview of how the system actually works. And this is one of those ones that it does kind of get a fair bit of attention, particularly around election times as well, kind of looking at kind of how the childcare policy and the subsidies and rebates are set up, because it is all tied into the goal as well of getting people into the workforce. And kind of getting working parents kind of back into the workforce as well. So there's kind of a political element to it and a larger economic element to it all as well. But when it kind of all boils down to actually making ends meet and actually being able to pay the childcare fees, it kind of feels very personal at that point. So it kind of ranges from a big political issue right down to a household family budget.
It's a very sensitive issue, and you've got so many moving pieces and so many different points of view, and you look at these childcare centres, they're understaffed.
Yeah.
They're underpaid. And, if you look at the way our family dynamic works, we used to, traditionally you'd have grandparents and aunts and uncles and neighbours, you'd have that whole tribal community helping each other take care of kids. We live in such a more isolated world. So we lean on childcare and we need it so much, but then obviously it costs so much. And then when you look at, okay, by the time I get dressed, pay for the bus, go and work 8 hours, race back. I think I mentioned I had a girlfriend of mine who's only, after she paid childcare, was making $10 a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads us into the tricky conversations that come out of this. And as you say, it is a very sensitive topic. For example, I suppose, about whether it's even worth it for kind of both parents, for instance, to return to work when 90% of the equivalent of one salary might be going to paying for the childcare. But that is very tough then to have that conversation, because returning to work isn't just then about the take-home pay. It's about kind of career progression. It's about not letting your superannuation kind of stall. It's about a whole bunch of things.
And also mental health as well.
Absolutely.
There are days where I cartwheel to work and I cartwheel to daycare drop-off, and I celebrate by wearing white because I know I'm not going to have sticky fingers climbing all over me for the day. But, you want to feel like you're contributing, you're using your brain, you're having that social engagement, interaction. Like, there's a lot of, I think, value of childcare that gets kind of put to the side because everyone focuses on the big issues. And, of course, they are the big issues for us to focus on.
Yeah.
But, sometimes I think looking after children can be very exhausting as well. So okay, my kids are going to be safe. They're going to be stimulated. They're going to have a great day. They're going to, build their social skills and so forth.
Get good food.
It makes everyone happy, yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of the big kind of question. I've been skirting around it now for a little bit. How do you actually afford it?
So obviously you need to find out what your subsidy is going to be. So what's the actual net figure per week? But it goes into the budget. It is a non-negotiable fee. You don't have any flexibility. You can't say, well, look, I'm only going to bring young Jimmy in for half the day, so I only pay half the daycare. It doesn't work like that. So it is something that you would put in the budget, like you put your rent in the budget, your groceries in the budget. It is an essential.
And I suppose then it's about the conversation with work as to
flexibility.
Are you going to be doing kind of full-time? Is it going to be part-time? And then as a result, kind of, are you only needing childcare for 2 days a week or 3 days a week or something along those lines? And these are all the variables that you'd be putting into the budget. But then you would be putting childcare in there next to kind of paying the mortgage or paying the rent or your food, because it's one of those core essentials.
But it's also about having the conversation with your partner if you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
How can they help as well? Get creative, brainstorm. Perhaps, one person can work remotely from home, or you both work remotely from home one day and share the load, where one person works in the morning and the other person, works in the evening, to help cut down those costs, particularly if you've got 2 kids in daycare, because it's frightfully expensive.
Yeah.
And that, if you're looking at, say, some childcare centres are up to $200 a day. If you've got 2 kids in there, if you can have them in, say, 4 days instead of 5, or 3 days instead of 4, that's $400 cash savings per week. That's like over $20,000 a year.
I suppose this is why it's important to have those conversations, isn't it? And partly because it seems a very risky thing to do, to say, well, you shouldn't be going to work because 90% of your pay is going to be going to childcare and it's not worth it. It kind of gets back to, we've talked about this before, that like the value of kind of looking at your household income as household income, rather than kind of your pay is going towards kind of childcare and yours is going towards paying the mortgage and paying the bills and things.
Yeah, a team.
Yeah, look at it all kind of coming into kind of almost one pot.
Exactly.
And then kind of make your assessments there. And it feels almost like a healthier way to have that conversation, because it's less about kind of assigning almost responsibility or worth to each individual's contribution.
Absolutely. And also, someone's career path, you may think, oh, this person, my partner isn't going to be earning much. You never know what's around the corner for them, their career path. They may, get a huge promotion. They may discover something. They may start a new business up. You've really got to look at each other as an equal and a team, and working together as, on joint goals and sharing the load. And, we're parents 50-50.
Yeah.
It's not just about, well, I earn this much more than you should be staying at home, because it doesn't make sense financially. There's so many other things to take into consideration.
Okay. I want to talk to you about some other ways to manage it. We might take a quick break first and then come back and do that, because I'm curious to see whether there are other ways to kind of manage childcare that are perhaps going to be more affordable, other options to look at, and also some of the other positives to actually engaging with that system, the childcare system, because we've kind of painted it as being a very expensive kind of process at the moment, but there are some upsides to it as well. So we might take a quick break and come back and look at those. Kana, we're talking all about childcare today, and we've talked about how expensive it is, and just about the way the kind of the rebate, the subsidy system works, and about those conversations, and about the importance of kind of having those conversations about how you afford it all as a family, or as a household, or as a unit. Is there an upside to childcare?
I think there is. For example, when your children are in daycare, you're not actually paying for the nappies, the wipes, which can be quite a substantial saving if they're there a couple of days a week. There also, in that fee, is the food. You've also got things like entertainment activities, sunscreen. You've got activities that sometimes even include languages and music, depending on your childcare centre.
Yeah.
And even therapists. So I know with my daycare centre, they regularly have therapists that go through and just do observations of the children, so that they can identify.
Oh, wow.
Particularly for kids that are looking at starting school in the next year or two. And they'll do things like notice how they hold a pen. They'll notice about their listening skills or emotional regulation. I mean, the other day I got a report back about how my 4-year-old was going, and what things they actually recommended she needed to be able to do to make sure she was, act at her sort of age group appropriate level.
Okay. So there are actually there's a lot of benefits to it then. And even financially there, as you say, there are some things there where you're no longer having to pay for those because, well, essentially you're paying for it through the fee.
And as I said, my 2 girls just started daycare 4 days a week, which is a killer. It's more expensive than private school fees when we sat down and did the maths. But I've noticed our grocery bill has actually gone down quite substantially because of nappies and snacks during the day and food, and especially with a lot of daycare centres, they can even give the kids breakfast. So if you've got a child that's got a fussy breakfast eater or hasn't eaten breakfast yet for whatever reason, they've got this permanent supply of food there as well. So it can actually help ease the grocery budget to a certain point.
Are there other ways to do it? This is all, we're talking kind of formal childcare centres, daycare centres and things. Are there other ways to look at this?
There are. And this is what I love getting creative about. So an au pair which is something we've used in the past. So an au pair is typically someone that's moved over for overseas. They've got a visa for a year and they will live with you and their job is to help look after the children.
Yeah.
And you give them sort of an allowance, which is normally sort of between $200 to $300 a week. And you obviously give them accommodation and feed them. But in turn, they then look after your children. So if you've got a couple of kids, that can actually be really great savings, and especially having, from a practical point of view with young kids, an extra set of hands in the house.
Because I suppose if you look just at the allowance element of it, that is already less than having 2 kids go to daycare for a day. But the big expense there is you need to have space in your house to accommodate someone, to give them their own space and their own privacy, and you need to be factoring their food and kind of their consumption of kind of water and electricity and all that kind of stuff. So there is a cost to it, but if you are set up,
economies of scale, if you've got a family, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
No, I've had au pairs quite a bit, and recently I had an intern that interned for me over 5 years ago, and she's from New York, and she messaged me and said, "Look, I'm having a bit of a tough time. Can I just move in with you?" And she said, "I'll help you with the kids." And she stayed with us for a month, and it was actually brilliant. Like, we fed her, of course, and she stayed in our house, but it actually really helped, just having that extra set of hands, and it cost nothing. And it made me think, gosh, with all these young people out there wanting to save up, for a deposit or just to survive financially, especially with, student loans and so forth, there's something in that.
Okay.
Having that person there that lives rent free, but gives you the equivalent of, say, 1 or 2 days worth of babysitting or care or help around the house.
Yeah, so suddenly if you've got a spare room, it's something that is worth exploring, and it doesn't, I suppose that there is the perception of it being really reserved for the wealthy. But I suppose if really the cost is the room and the food, and as you say, economies of scale, it suddenly opens it up to anyone that has a room.
I don't think it's anything to do with whether you've got wealthy or not. I think
Yeah.
it's just about space. If you have
It's
that
more
space.
the perception of it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the other option is obviously grandparents, having that conversation with retired grandparents to say, look, can you help us out? Can you do 1 day a week? Or can one set of grandparents, if you have grandparents, obviously that are able and capable and wanting to do this, can you do maybe 1 day a fortnight, and the other grandparent or aunt or uncle or cousin or someone else might want to, look after those kids as well. And there's lots of science behind, when grandparents look after their grandchildren or the elderly look after children, it's so good for their mental health.
Yeah.
But also the stimulation. And, it can really comes back to that idea of what we've moved away from, that of the community.
The village.
The village, exactly. Yeah. The other option is nannies, which I know for young families that have young children and say 2 or 3 children, and to put them into daycare is just but not possible financially. Having a nanny can be a great solution because you've got paying that one person to look after those 2 children or sometimes 3 children at the same time. It's, it ends up being financially better. And then the other option is looking at sharing the load. And this is something I did particularly when I was a single mother with my girlfriends who are also on a really tight budget is, I would take her kids and Rocco and take them out for the day and look after them so that she didn't have to pay for someone. And then we would flip the other way and she would take Rocco with her kids. And our children have the best memories. And when they see each other, it's like they're brothers and sisters. It's so beautiful. And they give each other big hugs and kisses, even though we haven't done this for a while. It's really put some beautiful bonds in place. And, Rocco respects my friends like equal parents. And it's something very special. But it, again, like putting your hand up and saying, look, because babysitting as well as childcare, it becomes increasingly expensive, really does destroy a family budget, in my opinion. So that's definitely another option. And
I like that because it's creative. It's a different way of doing it. And I mean, if you are kind of in a parents group or something and talking to other people who are maybe in a similar boat, why wouldn't you explore it?
And I've done it with not just one friend, with a group of friends. Obviously, you've got to be careful and sensible and make it fair and equitable for everyone. But it's so good for the kids as well. They just have so much fun. And the last couple of ideas is looking at working smarter, not harder. So I spoke with a nurse and she told me how she revisited her working hours and was able to actually work longer hours so that she could pull her child out of one of the days of daycare, which saved her money. So getting savvy with the way that you're using that time.
Okay.
And I know for myself, I drop my kids off quite early and I do pick them up quite late, but I just say to myself, okay, get as much work as you possibly can in that time so that when they're not in daycare and it's the weekend, I can just relax and be as present as possible, knowing that, okay, I use that time wisely and efficiently. And I'm someone who works myself, so it's a bit different. But
yeah, so suddenly it might be kind of doing 4 10-hour shifts as opposed to 5 8-hours.
Exactly.
And in doing so, you've saved yourself a full day of childcare.
Exactly.
Okay. You've given us a lot to think about. Is there, and I know I asked this kind of knowing that, of course, you're going to have something else. Is there anything else, Canna, that we...
I do have a couple of important points because this is the one area I'm actually quite passionate about. Because
I could just see, I was about to start wrapping things up and I could just see you are not done.
I'm
You are
not
just,
done.
you are bouncing on your seat, just wanting to say more. I'm going to take a step back, right, away from the microphone, and it is all yours for the next 90 seconds.
All right, preschool. So as your
Great idea.
Thank you. This is why you tried to cut me off. I'm like, no, I haven't said the most
I'm sorry.
important point yet.
And that 90 seconds didn't last long. Suddenly I wanted to join in. Yes, preschool is fantastic.
Preschool, so much cheaper.
Yeah.
The problem with preschool is you've got to get them on the list as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And don't just put them on one waiting list, put them on multiple waiting lists at multiple preschools. And then the best advice I was given is call all the time.
Yeah.
Call them, let them know your situation. Let them know that, you can be flexible with days if you can, and really just hustle them a spot because preschool is much, much cheaper than daycare.
Yeah.
Obviously not as flexible. Well, you don't have the long hours, drop-offs 9:30, pickups anywhere between 2:30 and 3, sometimes 3:30, but it's another option to fall back on, especially if you can back it up with maybe a grandparent doing pickup or something like that.
Yeah, a few things that you do need to consider, and it varies from state to state. Kind of often the starting age might be that they must be turning 4 in that year, or things like that. Also must kind of be toilet trained, and you've got to take your own lunch and snacks and all those kinds of things. So, but you are right. All of a sudden, it does open up another option, and kind of the educational element of that is probably greater at preschool than it is at childcare because it is designed to prepare kids to go to school.
Exactly. But you've got to get on those waiting lists because obviously those are long waiting lists.
Yeah.
And then finally, can I add with a financial tip?
Yes. I mean, that is really what we're here for.
Duh.
Duh.
So the lifestyle creep. The moment your children finish daycare and start school, make sure that those newfound savings that come from no longer having to pay daycare, make sure they count. So, for example, if you have a mortgage and you've been paying, say, $1,500 per month or $2,000 per month in daycare fees, increase your mortgage repayment, if that's one of your goals, by $2,000. Obviously, checking with the bank if you're at a fixed rate and make sure your redraw facility or offset account is there. But I guarantee you, if you don't take control proactively, that $2,000 savings will evaporate and get spent elsewhere. So
That's great advice.
you will see me like doing backflips across the school when I have my last day of daycare fees. But it is really important that you do this. And so many people say to me, am I ever going to be able to afford, to put my children in private schools if that's what's important to them? I'm like, well, your kids are in daycare. You're actually paying more in daycare than you would be in private schools. And they go, oh, yes, that's right. So, and then, if something like, that private education is something you want, put that into a regular savings plan. You're not paying $2,000 in daycare, put it into a regular savings plan. So it's the equivalent of what helping save up and pay for your child's education further down the track if that's important to you.
Okay. That all makes sense.
Zach, I went over 90 seconds, but you can have the mic back.
Oh, thank you. No, look, that was definitely worthwhile. I'm glad I gave you that extra time.
You actually launched towards the microphone when I said preschool.
Oh, no, well, I mean,
I've seen a reaction like
I
that
love
from you.
preschool. Preschool is fantastic.
I got my kids on Apple on 5 wait lists and we haven't gotten to any of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I didn't get them on early enough. So there you go. Learn from my stuff up.
Oh, I mean, it's just, we are fortunate to live kind of a couple of minutes walk from our
jealous.
like local kind of community preschool, and it is fantastic, kind of full, kind of well rated, kind of, and everything. And it's just, it makes me appreciate just how fortunate we are in terms of the position, kind of where we are there. But I cannot speak highly enough of preschool, so I'm very glad that you mentioned that. Okay, we have covered a lot. And it does actually make me feel still as though this is a huge financial kind of challenge for families to come up with what can be kind of $160, $170 a day per child for childcare. It is really, really tough. And of course, the subsidy and rebates system is there, and it is designed to help people. And it is kind of scaled based on how much you earn and a bunch of other kind of factors. But it is there to help, and you do it all through the childcare centre. That will help you kind of do that. But at the same time, you need to be having respectful conversations about the return to work, about kind of how this is going to be afforded as a family or as a household if you're doing it with somebody else.
And sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. It should be one of the first things that you're doing, and then planning kind of how you budget for it, how you actually afford it, because this is one of those kind of not negotiables. Because once you're in a childcare centre, for instance, there's competition for spots. As well. And you really don't have the ability to kind of chop and change and kind of drop days and pick up other days and things. So you need to treat it as a not negotiable in terms of when you're budgeting for it. There are other ways to do it, though, as we discussed. Things like au pairs, nannies, grandparents, family members, friends, sharing the load with other people who might have kids in a similar kind of situation that you're in. And also, they keep in mind that there is a financial upside to childcare as well, that there are some costs that you no longer have to pay yourself because you're paying it essentially through your childcare fees in terms of education and entertainment and food and like the socialization of kids as well. And that really good point that you made at the end, obviously, as well as preschool was a very good point, but that other point that when you actually do then get that money back in your budget, because childcare days, daycare days are behind you and the kids are off to school, don't let lifestyle creep take over. Use that money to achieve your financial goals rather than just suddenly going, great, free money, I'm going to spend it on
stuff.
Yes, I was trying to think of something frivolous and nothing I thought of. All I could think of was a PlayStation. And I'm like, I don't really know. But
I don't really imagine you as a PlayStation
I'm not a
player.
PlayStation kind of guy.
How random.
I think it was just because I had a conversation with someone about a PlayStation this morning and it was the first thing that came to mind. And that's what you're going to go and spend your childcare money on. A savings tip to finish on for today. I'm still waiting for the savings tips to come flooding into my Instagram, Michael Thompson Author. But in the meantime, they seem to be coming in via yours instead.
So, Butcher Crowd, again, a very loyal follower. Thank you for sending this through to me. So it's not really actually about a savings. It's more about quality and good value. But this is one of those food box delivery services, and they supply with Australian supplies of meat and seafood. And there's free delivery, and you can, if you're away for the week or weekend, you can skip a week. And the meat is 100% grass fed, and the seafood is wild caught, and you can actually build your box. So it varies in price, but you can pick and choose as to particular cuts of meat that you like or particular seafood, and have it delivered for free on your doorstep. So you obviously need to check the area to make sure your area is covered, but meat can be, and I have a bit of a meat story to share with you. One day, it can be very expensive, but this seems excellent value for money. And I thought when I looked into it after it was shared with me, I thought I did share the love.
That sounds really ominous. That one day I have a meat story to share with you. Okay.
There was a bit of a frugal fail in my household. I took the girls to a party and left Tom and Rocco at home to hang out and have some bonding time.
Yeah.
While I was out and about, they went to Oakberry and got ASEA bowls and expensive smoothies. Like, ASEA bowls are expensive. They're $17 and smoothies. And then they took it upon themselves that they both felt like they wanted some meat. They had a craving for meat and wanted to barbecue. And Tom is going through this kind of, like, I'd say, very wild meat, kind of like barbecue. He gets in some barbecue moods and just doesn't really know what he's doing. And anyway, so he went to a very expensive butcher and bought one piece of meat. And I came home and found them and cooking this very large, expensive piece of meat, and he ruined it. And then he told me how much it cost, and it was $113
For one piece of meat.
a piece of meat. I didn't even think meat like that could possibly ever cost that. I'm like, Tom, do you realize how many groceries I could buy with that much money? And it is fruitful, frugal February. What are you doing? And then I found the oakberry acai bowls and smoothies. I leave him alone for like a couple of hours.
Jesus, what was it, like unicorn steak or something?
I don't know, but he ruined it. He ruined
Giraffe.
it, and it was like tough and yeah.
Golly. Oh, wow.
Don't see. There you go. That was a bit of my fail.
That's a fantastic way to finish today. Look, if anyone wants more of those stellar stories and tips, where can they find you?
Well, Canna Campbell Official, if you want to see into the craziness of my household with 3 wild kids, 1 very naughty dog, and Tom, who is a complete wild child. So Canna Campbell Official, or if you just want the safe, savvy financial advice, go to Sugar Mama TV.
All on Instagram, and you can hear me every day on Fear and Greed, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit follow on the podcast. Next week, we are talking about, it's a bit of a scenario. It's a hypothetical scenario. It is, if I had $1,000, here's what I would do. And I'm actually really excited to hear what you say, because $1,000 is it's your sweet spot, isn't it? Because of the $1,000 project.
It certainly is. I'm a little bit excited already.
And I love a hypothetical scenario. And so we're going to get into that one next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. Don't miss it.